Thanks for tuning in to Crazy Mango Stories. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more betrayal stories. The bench sat nestled beneath the old oak tree, its branches sprawling like the fingers of an ancient giant, casting long shadows over the calm waters of the lake. I used to love coming here. This spot, with its gentle waves lapping against the shore, had been our family's refuge. It was where we escaped from the world, where life felt simpler, easier. Now it felt different. Everything felt different. The wood was worn, faded, and splintering, much like the memories of the life Blaine and I had built together. I stared out at the water, the same water where my daughters, Clara and Emily, once splashed and shrieked with joy, their tiny hands tossing stones that created ripples far bigger than they imagined. Blaine would sit beside me, her laughter blending with theirs. Those were the days when her smile was real before it turned into the forced, practiced smile of a woman hiding something. It's funny how you can sit in the same place and feel like a stranger in your own life. I could still hear the echoes of those moments if I closed my eyes. But today, those echoes felt hollow. They reminded me of the things I didn't want to think about, how everything had slipped through my fingers. I shifted uncomfortably on the bench, the coldness of the wood pressing into my back. The weight of what was coming bore down on me. Today wasn't just another day at the lake. Today was the day Blaine and I would finally face each other. It would be the first time since she told me she wanted out of the marriage, the first time since I had walked away, unable to handle the storm she had unleashed. I hadn't expected it, not then. Hell, I never saw any of it coming. But now, looking back, I could see it. The signs had been there all along. I was just too damn blind to admit it. I inhaled deeply, trying to calm the storm building inside me. The lake was supposed to be a peaceful place, but today, it felt more like a battleground. The quiet breeze that swept through the trees didn't bring peace anymore. It felt like the calm before the inevitable clash. Our place had been full of life once. It was where I taught Clara how to skip stones and where Blaine and I had our picnics, her head resting on my shoulder as the sun dipped below the horizon. I used to think those moments would last forever, that they were the foundation of something unbreakable. But foundations crack, even the strongest ones. And the worst part? You don't see the cracks until it's too late. I ran my hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the upcoming conversation pressing heavier with each passing minute. Blaine and I had been drifting for years, but I had held on, believing that we could fix things. That if I just tried harder, if I just put in a little more effort, we'd find our way back to each other. But now I knew better. You can't fix something that's already shattered. Today would be the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. I had made up my mind, and there was no turning back. I wasn't here to listen to more lies or excuses. I wasn't here to save what was already dead. I was here to end it. As the sun started to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the lake, I could hear the distant laughter of other families enjoying their time. It reminded me of what I was losing, of what had already slipped away. But I had to stay focused. Blaine would be here soon, and once she sat down on this bench, everything would change. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves above me. I closed my eyes, trying to push the emotions away. All that was left now was the cold truth. I had loved Blaine once deeply. But now, all that love was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness that had been growing inside me for months. She had killed it. Whether she knew it or not, she had slowly strangled the life out of what we once had. And today, I was going to make sure she understood that. With one last look at the water, I stood up, pacing around the bench. My chest felt tight, my hands balled into fists. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, if anyone ever really was. But what choice did I have? This was the only way forward. In just a few minutes, Blaine would arrive, and when she did, I would make sure that this time there would be no going back. There was nothing left to save. I felt a surge of determination rise within me as I checked the watch on my wrist. Blaine would be here any second now, and with her, the final chapter of our marriage would unfold. There was no more room for doubts, no more space for second guessing. This was it. And in this place, where we had once built a life together, I was about to tear it all apart. The day Blaine told me she wanted out of the marriage was the day my world cracked open, and I was left standing in the ruins. I could still see her face, perfectly composed, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, as if she was discussing weekend plans, not the death of everything we had built. I had sat there staring, dumbfounded, as the words left her lips, wondering if I'd heard her wrong. "I think we should separate, Louis." Just like that. No drama, no build-up, just cold, calculated precision. I remember the way she said it, like it had been rehearsed 1,000 times in front of a mirror. I guess I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for months, maybe years, now that I look back. The distance, the late nights, the sudden need for privacy. But I had ignored them all, thinking it was just a rough patch like every couple goes through. But it wasn't a rough patch. It was the beginning of the end. I hadn't reacted at first. I couldn't. I was stuck in this strange state of disbelief, my brain trying to catch up with what my ears had just heard. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could do was stare at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to laugh and tell me it was a joke. But she didn't. She just stared back at me, her face as cold and emotionless as a marble statue. Why I finally managed to choke out the word feeling foreign in my mouth. She shrugged, of all things. A goddamn shrug, like she couldn't be bothered to offer me a real explanation. "I'm not happy, Louis. I haven't been for a long time." I felt the sting of her words like a slap to the face. Happy. What the hell did that even mean? I had given her everything, worked long hours at the fire station, provided for her, loved her, and now, out of nowhere, she was telling me she wasn't happy. And you didn't think to talk to me about this before? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Blaine sighed, looking away, as if the conversation was already exhausting her. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed bitterly at that. Couldn't help myself. Too late for that. She flinched at my words, but it was the first real reaction I'd seen from her. For a brief moment, I saw the woman I married, the woman who used to care about me. But it was fleeting, and soon enough, the mask was back on, her face impassive. It was then that I knew. Blaine had already checked out of our marriage. She wasn't here to talk about fixing things. She wasn't here to ask for a second chance or to work on our problems. She was here to tell me she was done, and there was no going back. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the conversation, dissecting every word, every look, every moment leading up to it. How could I have missed it? How could I have been so blind? For months, I had been going about my life, thinking everything was fine, while Blaine had been plotting her escape. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, knocking the wind out of me, leaving me gasping for air. I wish I could say that I had a big blow-up moment, that I screamed at her or demanded answers, but I didn't. I just shut down. I couldn't process what was happening. My mind went into overdrive, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? Was I not enough for her? The questions kept swirling in my head, but no answers came, just the sinking feeling that I was losing everything. Blaine didn't seem to care. In the days that followed, she carried on as if nothing had happened. She still smiled at the girls, still went to work, still kept up appearances. But with me, she was distant, detached. She had already made up her mind, and there was no convincing her otherwise. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I would grow old with, was gone, and in her place was someone I barely recognized. I tried, in my own pathetic way, to fix things. I suggested counseling, begged her to think about the kids, reminded her of the life we had built, but she was unmoved. She said all the right things, nodded at the right times, offered sympathetic looks, but her mind was already elsewhere. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't thinking about us. She wasn't thinking about our girls. She was thinking about herself, about what her life would look like without me in it. It didn't take long for the real truth to come out. One night, after a particularly painful argument, I decided to follow her. I know how that sounds like something out of a bad thriller, but I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. She had been so secretive, disappearing for hours without explanation. So I got in my truck and tailed her, heart pounding in my chest as I tried to stay out of sight. She wasn't going to work or to see friends. No, she was going to someone else. I'll never forget that moment. The moment I saw Blaine walk into that hotel with another man. I didn't need to see his face to know who he was. Blaine's new lover. The man she had been seeing behind my back while I was still trying to hold onto the scraps of our marriage. My world collapsed in on itself right then and there. The shock, the disbelief, the heartbreak, it all hit me at once. I should have felt anger. I should have stormed in there and confronted them both. But instead, I just sat there in my truck, numb. It was like my body shut down, refusing to process the reality of what I was witnessing. Everything around me became a blur. The sound of the wind outside, the hum of the engine, the sight of the two of them disappearing into the hotel, it all felt distant, unreal. And that's when it hit me. There was nothing left to save. No matter what Blaine said or did after this, our marriage was over. She had broken something that couldn't be fixed. Trust, once it's gone, you can't ever get it back. Not really. You can pretend, you can try, but deep down, you know it's gone. And that's what Blaine had done. She had taken everything we built together and shattered it into a million pieces. I went home that night and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, empty. The man I was, the husband, the father, the provider, it was all slipping away. And the worst part, there was nothing I could do to stop it. From that moment on, I knew there was no point in trying to save the marriage. I knew that no matter what Blaine said or did, no matter how much she pretended to care, it was over. I didn't confront her about the hotel. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I already knew everything I needed to know. Blaine wasn't mine anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. The sunlight shimmered on the lake, dancing across the surface in patterns that would have been calming on any other day, but not today. I had been sitting on that bench for what felt like hours, replaying everything in my head, the way Blaine had torn our life apart, the way I had caught her walking into that hotel with another man, and now I was waiting for her, waiting to put an end to this nightmare once and for all. Today was the day of our meeting, the final one. There would be no more pretending, no more hoping that things could somehow be fixed. I had made my decision, and I was going to see it through. Blaine was going to sign those divorce papers, and we were going to cut ties clean, cold, and final. I had thought about what I would say, what I would do countless times. But preparing myself for this moment was like preparing for a fire. You can have all the training, all the strategies, but when the flames are licking at your skin, you find out real quick whether you can handle the heat or not. I wasn't a stranger to pressure. Being a firefighter had put me in life or death situations more times than I could count. Running into burning buildings, facing walls of smoke, knowing every step could be your last. It trained you to keep your head clear, to stay focused. But this was different. This wasn't something I could charge into with an axe and water hose. This was emotional carnage, and it felt like I was suffocating before it even started. I pulled out the divorce papers from the folder on my lap, the edges already worn from how many times I had unfolded and refolded them. I had everything laid out clear, concise, and ready to go. The house would be sold, and the money split. We'd keep joint custody of Clara and Emily, but they would live with me most of the time, given Blaine's unpredictable hours and, well, her priorities. But this wasn't just about dividing assets and deciding custody. There was more to it than that. I had done my research. Blaine thought she had been clever, that I was too blind to see what was happening right in front of me. She didn't know about the private investigator I hired. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to sit back and let her walk all over me while she kept her secrets tucked away neatly. No, I had seen enough. The investigator had come through for me in ways I didn't even expect. He had dug up everything: text messages, receipts, even photos, and not just the obvious stuff with her lover. Blaine had been siphoning money from our joint account for months, probably preparing to leave me with nothing but the shell of our former life. But now I was ready. She wasn't going to take one more thing from me. I stood up and started pacing again, the papers gripped tight in my hand. I didn't want this confrontation, but I needed it. I needed to look Blaine in the eyes and let her know that I wasn't going to let her play me for a fool anymore. This wasn't about revenge, it was about control. Taking back control of my life, of our kids' lives, of everything that she had so carelessly thrown away. And what about the girls? Clara and Emily didn't know the full extent of what was happening yet. They knew something was wrong. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for, but they didn't know that their mother had ripped apart our family. I hadn't told them about the divorce yet. Part of me wanted to shield them from it for as long as possible, but I knew that once this was finalized, they would have to know. I had already decided I would fight for full custody. Blaine loved them, sure, but how could I trust her with them after everything she had done? The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. I could feel the tension rising inside me like a coiled spring ready to snap. I clenched and unclenched my fists, trying to keep my emotions in check. This meeting wasn't about anger, it was about getting things done. I couldn't let my emotions run wild, not now. I had to stay calm, stay focused. Blaine would likely try to reconcile. I knew her too well. She would come to the lake, sit across from me with that sad, practiced smile, and say all the right things. She would talk about the girls, about how much she loved me, about how we could still fix things. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not again. She had shown me exactly who she was, and I had no interest in hearing her lies anymore. The only thing that mattered now was protecting Clara and Emily. They were all I had left. My job as a firefighter had kept me away from home more than I wanted, but I'd make it work. I had already started looking into different shifts, figuring out how I could be there for them without Blaine in the picture. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing about this was going to be easy. I had even thought about selling the house and moving somewhere else, somewhere far away from the memories that haunted every room. Every time I walked through that front door, I could feel the weight of everything we had lost. The kitchen where we used to cook together, the living room where we watched the girls take their first steps, the bedroom where Blaine and I once held each other close. It was all poisoned now, tainted by her betrayal. Maybe we could start fresh somewhere new, me and the girls. A place by the lake, perhaps. Somewhere simple, quiet, where we could heal from all of this. I would rebuild my life, piece by piece, and create something better for my daughters. But first, I had to deal with Blaine. I had to make sure she signed those papers, that she agreed to my terms. And if she didn't, well, I had more than enough leverage to ensure that she would. The private investigator's report was my ace in the hole, and I wasn't afraid to use it if I had to. As I sat back down on the bench, the folder resting on my lap once more, I glanced up at the horizon. Blaine would be here soon. I could almost hear the crunch of her shoes on the gravel as she approached, could see the way she would hesitantly sit down beside me, trying to gauge my mood. But I wasn't the same man she had been manipulating all these months. I wasn't the man who would sit quietly and listen to her excuses. Today, I was in control. Today, I was going to end this on my terms. I glanced at my watch. Any minute now, and when Blaine arrived, she'd realized that the man she once thought she could deceive was long gone. The only thing left was a man determined to protect his children and move forward without her. I heard her before I saw her, her footsteps crunching on the gravel pathway that led to the lake. For a brief second, I felt my heart tighten in my chest, the familiar pull of a life we had shared. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold certainty of what I had to do. Blaine appeared from behind the trees, her silhouette dark against the fading light of the late afternoon. She was wearing a black coat, her hands tucked into her pockets as she approached the bench where I sat. Her face, framed by her auburn hair, looked calm, too calm. I could see she had rehearsed this moment just like she had rehearsed that day at the kitchen table when she told me she wanted out. But this wasn't going to go the way she expected. She stopped a few feet from me, hesitating. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just waited, watching her as she gathered her courage. Finally, she sat down beside me, her body language cautious, like she was afraid to make the first move. "Louis," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. It made my skin crawl. I didn't know if he'd come. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes fixed on the lake, watching the ripples dance across the surface. "I'm here, aren't I?" She sighed, her breath visible in the cool evening air. I've been thinking about us, about everything, and I think we can still work this out. I almost laughed, but I bit it back, keeping my tone as cold as the wind that swept off the water. Is that so? Lewis, please, her voice trembled, but I didn't let it affect me. I knew this game too well. I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. That word love. It didn't mean anything coming from her anymore. It was just a tool she used, a word she wielded like a weapon to get what she wanted. And I wasn't falling for it. I turned to face her, finally my eyes locking onto hers. Love. Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back, lying to me? Walking into a hotel with some guy while I'm at home with the girls? Her face paled. For a moment I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She was good at keeping up appearances when it counted. It wasn't like that. Lewis, I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't. I cut her off. Stop, the word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. I don't want to hear any more of your excuses. You had plenty of chances to come clean, to talk to me, to try and fix things, but you didn't. You chose him. And now you have to live with that. Blaine blinked rapidly, her composure slipping. I didn't choose him over you. Lewis, it wasn't like that. I was confused, and I didn't know how to tell you. But I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to end things like this. The rage simmered beneath my skin, but I kept it under control. I wasn't here to explode. I wasn't here to have a dramatic confrontation. I was here to end this. I reached into the folder beside me and pulled out the divorce papers, laying them on the bench between us. You're going to sign these, I said, my voice steady, and you're going to agree to my terms. The house gets sold, the money gets split, and we share custody of the girls, but they'll live with me the majority of the time. She stared at the papers, her mouth slightly open, as if the sight of them physically pained her. Lewis, please. I don't want a divorce. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. We don't have to throw everything away. I shook my head, my jaw clenched tight. There's nothing left to fix, Blaine. You made sure of that. Her eyes filled with desperation now, the calm facade crumbling. Lewis, think about the girls. They need both of us. We can't just split up their lives like this. Don't do this to them. I narrowed my eyes. Don't you dare bring them into this. You already did enough damage to their lives with your lies. I'm doing what's best for them, what's best for all of us. I could see her fighting back tears now, her hands trembling slightly as they rested on her lap, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. And if you refuse to sign, I continued, my voice low, almost menacing, then I'll make sure the whole world knows what you've been up to. I hired a private investigator, Blaine. I have everything I need to ruin you if you don't agree to this. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. What? I pulled a second folder from my bag and tossed it onto the bench next to the divorce papers. It landed with a heavy thud, the contents spilling slightly from the sides. Photos, text messages, receipts. All of it. You think you were smart, covering your tracks, but you weren't. I know everything. Blaine stared at the folder like it was a snake ready to strike. Her breathing quickened, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Lewis, please. You don't need to do this. I'm not doing anything, Blaine, I said, standing up and towering over her. You did this to yourself. And if you want to protect whatever's left of your reputation, you'll sign those papers and agree to my terms. Her lips trembled, and I could see the war going on inside her head. She wanted to fight back. I could feel it. But she also knew that I wasn't bluffing. She had no choice, and she knew it. You're really going to ruin me like this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I leaned down, my face close to hers. You ruined yourself the moment you decided to walk out on our marriage. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The wind rustled through the trees, the only sound breaking the tense silence between us. Finally, Blaine exhaled shakily and picked up the pen I had placed beside the papers. Her hand hovered over the signature line, and for a second, I thought she might back out, but then, with a resigned sigh, she signed her name. One clean, decisive stroke. It was over. I stepped back, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. I had done it. I had taken back control. Blaine sat frozen for a moment, her hand still holding the pen, her eyes staring blankly at the papers. We're done here, I said, my voice cold. I'll have my lawyer take care of the rest. I don't make this harder than it has to be, Blaine. She didn't respond, didn't even look at me. I could see the realization settling over her, the weight of what she had lost finally sinking in. But it was too late. Without another word, I turned and walked away from the bench, the sound of my footsteps echoing against the gravel path. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to look back at. As I reached the edge of the lake, the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shadows. The air was colder now, sharper, but for the first time in months, I felt lighter, like a burden I had been carrying had finally been lifted off my shoulders. It was over, and I was free. The stillness of the lake matched the silence between us after I walked away, but I could feel Blaine's gaze boring into my back. I didn't look over my shoulder as I made my way along the gravel path, my heart beating with the finality of it all. This was at the end of our marriage, the end of everything we had shared, and the only thing left to do was walk away. But I couldn't help wondering what was going through her head in those moments. What was she feeling? Was she regretting her choices? Or was she still trying to justify everything in her mind? She had always been good at that, turning things around, making herself the victim. I wouldn't be surprised if, in her own twisted way, she saw herself as the one who had been wronged. I didn't get far before I heard her voice, barely audible, but there was something raw in it that made me pause. "Louis, wait." I stopped, my back still to her, hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wasn't sure if I wanted to turn around. I wasn't sure if I even cared what she had to say anymore, but something made me do it. Maybe it was the need for closure, or maybe it was curiosity. Either way, I turned slowly to face her. Blaine was standing now, her body rigid, her face pale. Her eyes, once so full of determination, now looked hollow. She was clutching the folder of evidence I had thrown on the bench, her fingers gripping it so tightly that her knuckles were white. Her lips trembled as she tried to find the words. You don't have to do this," she stammered. "We can still fix this, Louis, please?" I almost couldn't believe it. After everything, she was still trying to spin the situation in her favor, still clinging to the idea that we could somehow salvage the mess she had made. But I could see the desperation now, the fear. She wasn't just afraid of losing me, she was afraid of losing her safety net, her security. She was afraid of facing the consequences of her choices. "Fix this," I echoed, my voice laced with disbelief. "You think there's anything left to fix?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion breaking through her facade. She looked fragile, lost. But I wasn't going to let her tears sway me. I had seen this show before, the crocodile tears, the remorse that only appeared when she realized she had lost control of the situation. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I made a mistake, but I never wanted to lose you. I was confused, and he was just there. It didn't mean anything." I shook my head, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "It didn't mean anything. You threw away our marriage, Blaine. You destroyed our family. Don't stand there and tell me it didn't mean anything." Her tears were falling freely now, streaking down her cheeks. She looked so different from the woman who had calmly told me she wanted out of our marriage. Now she was unraveling, and I could see the weight of her choices crushing her. "I don't know why I did it," she cried, her voice raw. I was scared, and I felt trapped. "But I never stopped loving you. I still love you. Louis, we can work through this. For the girls. For us." Her words hung in the air, thick with desperation. For a split second, I felt a flicker of something, a memory of the love we had shared, the life we had built. But it was gone as quickly as it came, drowned out by the anger, the betrayal, and the cold reality of what she had done. I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't the man who would bend to her will, who would believe her lies. "You don't love me, Blaine," I said, my voice low and firm. "If you did, you wouldn't have done any of this. You made your choice." I turned to walk away again, but her voice stopped me once more. "It wasn't just about us," she said, her voice shaking. "It was about him too." I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Her words sent a chill through me, and I turned slowly, my eyes narrowing as I looked at her. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground as if she was debating whether or not to tell me the truth. Then, with a deep breath, she raised her head, her tear-streaked face filled with guilt. "I thought I could leave you for him. I thought he was the answer to everything I was feeling. But I was wrong." I took a step closer, my jaw clenched. "Who is he?" Blaine swallowed hard, her eyes flickering with fear. "His name is Derek. He's not just some random guy. Louis, he promised me things. A new life. A fresh start." My fist tightened at my sides. So, it wasn't just an affair. It was more than that. Blaine had been planning to leave me for someone else, and now she was telling me this as if it somehow made things better, as if it justified her actions. "And where is he now?" I asked, my voice hard. She looked away, shame flooding her expression. "He left. When I told him about the girls, he didn't want anything to do with it. He didn't want to be a part of our lives." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "So he used you, just like you used me." Blaine winced at my words, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I thought he cared about me, but I was wrong. I ruined everything for nothing. I felt a surge of satisfaction at her admission, but it was short-lived. None of this mattered anymore. Derek or no Derek, the damage was done, and the fact that she had been ready to abandon our daughters for some other man only solidified my decision. "You're right about one thing," I said coldly. "You did ruin everything. And now you're going to live with the consequences." Blaine's face crumpled, and she took a step toward me, reaching out with trembling hands. "Please, Louis, I'll do anything. I'll sign the papers. I'll agree to everything. Just don't hate me. I don't take the girls away from me." I stared at her, the woman who had been my wife, the mother of my children, and felt nothing but a deep, hollow emptiness. There was no room for pity, no space for forgiveness. Blaine had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "I don't hate you, Blaine," I said, my voice emotionless, "but I don't love you either. And you've lost the right to ask for anything." She collapsed onto the bench, her body shaking with sobs, clutching the divorce papers in her hands. I watched her for a moment, feeling the finality of it all settle over me like a heavy weight. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. And for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. Blaine was broken. The marriage was broken, but I wasn't. Not anymore. Without another word, I turned and walked away, the sound of her sobs fading into the distance behind me. The wind picked up again, carrying the last remnants of her voice into the evening air. I had done what I came to do. The marriage was over, and Blaine would have to face the reality of the choices she had made. As I left the lake behind, the weight of the past lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time, I felt free. As I walked away from Blaine, her sobs muffled by the wind, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The lake, once a symbol of peace, now felt like a battlefield I was leaving behind. Victorious but exhausted. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was wading through thick mud, but I knew I couldn't stop now. There was still one last thing I had to do. One more piece of this broken puzzle I needed to deal with. Derek, the man who had taken what was mine and then discarded Blaine like she was nothing. I had expected him to be some lowlife, but the private investigator's report had told a different story. Derek was a wealthy, successful businessman, arrogant, smooth, and completely lacking in integrity. He wasn't just some fling. Blaine had actually believed he was her ticket to a new life, a fresh start away from the life we had built together. But it hadn't worked out that way, had it? I stopped at the edge of the lake, looking out at the horizon. The sun had dipped lower, casting the water in shades of orange and red. It felt like the end of something bigger than just a marriage, like I was closing a chapter on a life I barely recognized anymore. But there was still that gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, the one that told me I couldn't let this go without making sure Derek knew exactly what would happen if he ever came near my family again. I turned and headed back toward the parking lot where my truck was waiting. I had already planned my next move. The investigator had given me Derek's home address and even his office. I wasn't going there to start a fight. I wasn't that stupid. But I needed to make it clear that if he ever so much as thought about coming near Clara or Emily, he'd regret it. I wasn't the type to make empty threats. As I climbed into my truck and fired up the engine, I felt the weight of the past few hours pressing down on me. The divorce papers were signed, Blaine was out of my life, and now it was time to deal with the last loose end. I drove through the winding streets of the city, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. My mind raced, replaying everything that had led me to this moment. Blaine's betrayal, the lies, the hotel, the way she had chosen someone else over her own family. And now this man, this Derek, had thought he could step into my life and steal away everything I had worked for. Not without consequences. It didn't take long to find his house. It was a sprawling mansion on the edge of town, the kind of place where men like Derek lived, men who thought money could buy anything, even other people's lives. I parked across the street, the engine still running as I stared at the house, its large windows glowing with the soft light of the evening. It was quiet, peaceful, like the calm before a storm. I wasn't here to make a scene. I wasn't going to pound on the door and demand a confrontation, but I needed him to know. I needed Derek to understand that his part in this story was over, and if he ever tried to come back into it, there would be consequences, serious ones. I sat there for a few minutes, gathering my thoughts. The anger that had been boiling inside me for months felt like a steady, cold burn now, controlled, focused. I wasn't going to let it consume me, but I wasn't going to let it go either. Not until I had made my point. I took a deep breath, grabbed the investigator's report from the passenger seat, and stepped out of the truck. I crossed the street, my boots crunching against the gravel as I made my way to the front door. The house loomed over me, silent and imposing, but I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. I rang the doorbell and waited. My heart pounded in my chest, but my mind was calm. After a few moments, I heard footsteps approaching from inside, and then the door swung open. There he was, Derek, the man who had taken everything from me and then walked away as if it meant nothing. He looked surprised to see me, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took me in. He was taller than I had expected, with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive clothes that screamed money, but I could see the wariness in his eyes. He knew who I was. "Louis," he said, his voice smooth, trying to play it cool. "I wasn't expecting you." I didn't bother with pleasantries. I held up the folder, the investigator's report, and stepped forward, my voice low and cold. "I don't care what you thought this was. I don't care what Blaine told you or what she thought you were offering. You're going to stay away from my daughters. You're going to stay away from me. And if I ever see you near my family again, you'll regret it." He blinked, taken aback by the bluntness of my words. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, fear, maybe, or recognition. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that, not by men like me. Men who didn't care about his money or his status. "Listen, man," Derek started, his voice careful, calculated. "I get it. Blaine and I." "No," I cut him off, stepping even closer. "You don't get it. Blaine's choices were hers to make, but you came into my life, my family's life, and you thought you could take whatever you wanted. Well, you can have Blaine. I don't care about her anymore, but you stay away from my girls. Do you understand?" He was silent for a long moment, his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning my face. I could tell he was trying to figure out if I was bluffing, but he must have seen something in my expression that told him I wasn't, because he nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, his voice low, his arrogance faltering for the first time. "Good." I dropped the folder at his feet, watching as the papers spilled out, photos and text messages documenting his affair with Blaine. "That's for you. Consider it a reminder of what happens when you cross the line. Derek didn't move. He just stood there, staring down at the scattered evidence, his face tightening with frustration, but he didn't say anything. He knew better. I turned and walked away without another word, leaving him standing in the doorway of his mansion. The cool night air hit me as I crossed the street and climbed back into my truck. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction settling over me, like I had finally taken control of something that had been spiraling out of control for far too long. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the house. Derek was no longer my concern. I had made my point, and he wouldn't dare come near my family again. But Blaine, she still had to live with her choices. She had chosen Derek over me, over our life, and he had left her with nothing. Now, she would have to face the consequences, not just of losing me, but of losing everything she had thought she could take. And if Derek ever so much as thought about hurting my daughters, well, he'd learn what real consequences looked like. I drove back toward the lake, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind clearer than it had been in months. There was no going back now. Only forward, only rebuilding what had been lost. And I would do it with my girls by my side, far away from Blaine and the mess she had created. The drive back to the lake was quieter than I expected. The noise that had been in my head for months, the swirling thoughts, the anger, the betrayal had finally subsided, leaving behind a strange kind of silence. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was close. The world outside my truck passed by in a blur of fading light, the streets empty as I headed toward the only place where things still made sense. The lake. It had always been my sanctuary. Even now, after everything that had happened, it felt like the only place where I could breathe. The place where I could think about the future without the weight of the past crushing down on me. I had ended things with Blaine, laid down the law with Derek, and now there was only one thing left to do: move on. As I pulled up to the gravel parking lot, I could see the lake shimmering in the distance, the last light of day reflecting off the water like 1,000 tiny stars. The air was cooler now, the kind of Christmas that signaled the end of summer. It felt fitting in a way. Everything was changing, but at least the seasons made sense. There was a natural order to them, something I could depend on. I parked the truck and sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. My chest felt tight, but not in the way it used to. It wasn't the suffocating pressure of betrayal anymore. It was something else. Something like finality, like I had reached the end of one chapter, and the next was waiting just beyond the horizon. I thought about my daughters, Claire and Emily, and how they would wake up tomorrow not knowing that everything had changed. I would have to sit them down, explain the divorce, tell them that mommy wasn't coming home anymore. It would break their hearts, and that was something I wasn't looking forward to. But they needed me now more than ever. I couldn't afford to fall apart, not for them, and not for myself. I climbed out of the truck, pulling my jacket tighter against the evening chill, and made my way down the familiar path to the lake. The crunch of gravel under my boots was the only sound, the world around me settling into a quiet that matched my own. When I reached the old bench, the same one I had been sitting on earlier, I hesitated for a moment. It was strange how a simple piece of wood could hold so many memories, so much weight. I had come here with Blaine once, back when things were good, back when we thought we had it all figured out, but that was another lifetime. Another Lewis, the man who sat on that bench now, wasn't the same man who had sat there with her all those years ago. I lowered myself onto the bench, staring out at the water, watching the way it moved gently against the shore. It was so calm, so steady, and for a second I wished my life could be like that, unshaken, constant. But life wasn't like the lake. Life was chaotic, messy, unpredictable, and I had to learn how to navigate it without losing myself in the storm. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and let out a long breath. This was it. The end of the marriage, the end of the pain, the end of everything that had been tearing me apart for months. I had faced it head on, and now there was nothing left to do but let it go. As I sat there, my mind wandered back to Blaine. I wondered where she was now. Maybe she was still at the lake, sitting alone on that bench, trying to figure out how everything had fallen apart. Or maybe she was with Derek, still clinging to the fantasy of a life that had never really existed. It didn't matter anymore. She wasn't my problem, not anymore. I had been angry for so long, angry at Blaine for what she had done, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, angry at the world for letting it happen. But the anger had burned itself out, leaving behind only the ashes of what used to be. And in those ashes, I had found something else, something that felt like acceptance. This was my life now, just me and my girls. Blaine had made her choices, and I had made mine. It was time to move forward. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, scrolling through the photos of Clara and Emily that I had saved. Their smiling faces looked back at me, innocent and full of life, completely unaware of the storm that had been raging around them. They were my reason for everything. They were the reason I had to stay strong, the reason I had to build a new life. They were my future. I stood up from the bench, feeling the cool breeze sweep across the lake, and started back toward my truck. The past was behind me now, and there was no point in dwelling on it anymore. The divorce papers were signed, the evidence was handed over, and I had made it clear to Derek that he was to stay away. Everything had been settled. As I reached the truck, I paused for a moment, looking back at the lake one last time. The sun had fully set now, and the stars were beginning to dot the sky, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. It was beautiful in a way. the kind of beauty that reminded me that there was more to life than the pain I had been carrying. I climbed into the truck and turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life. As I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the road, I felt something shift inside me. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The weight of the past was finally lifting, and in its place was something that felt a lot like hope. The road stretched out before me, dark and winding, but I didn't feel lost. I knew where I was going. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just a man at the end of his marriage anymore. I was a father, a protector, and someone who was finally ready to rebuild his life. As I drove away from the lake, the stars above me shining brighter with every mile, I knew one thing for certain. I was never going to look back. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a good thing.